It's a similar pattern, a similar experience. My abduction started from my earliest memories. Even before I remember the whole kind of beginning to end of what was happening with these entities, I was afraid of members of my family who were tall and blonde and had really big blue eyes and were really thin, because they reminded me of these entities that I had already been exposed to at 2 or 3 years old. And there were these, they're called Nordic, is what people refer to them as in the UFO community. And the Nordic alien entities are similar to human, but their eyes are bigger. They don't look exactly the same. I found their hair to almost be translucent. They weren't nice to me. I was scared of them as a little child. So no one could understand when I was 2 or 3 years old why I didn't want to go to certain members of the family. But, I was already traumatized by being exposed to these entities.
Generation X Paranormal.
Hey everybody, welcome back.
Hey everybody.
We're Generation X Paranormal. I'm Logan.
And I'm Nicole.
And we're so glad you're here. Very, very interesting show today. I'm not really sure how to unpack this, so I'm just going to go ahead and roll right into it. Today we have Karin Wilkinson, and what can you tell us about Karin?
She is the author of Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. She is a regular writer, contributor to L.A. Marzulli's monthly newsletter, Politics, Prophecy, and the Supernatural. She is a wife, mother, and a grandmother. She worked in the software industry for many years before leaving to raise her family. And this is a quote by her to kind of introduce what's going to be coming. It's going to be a little bit intense. It may be hard for some people to listen to, just as a forewarning. Yeah. So she says, "For as early as I can remember, I have been abducted by non-human alien entities, possibly hundreds of times. I have seen many UAPs, UFOs throughout my lifetime, and suffered emotional and physical ailments, and had surgeries due to the things that they did to me. I pray that I can utilize my experiences to glorify God, to share the truth, and to help others in any way I can."
Yeah, and just like Nicole said, just be forewarned. This is probably going to be triggering for some folks, and it is going to be most likely a very, very good conversation, but it can probably be rough. So. But yeah, I can't wait to talk to her. Let's talk to Karin. Well, hey, Karin, welcome to Generation X Paranormal.
Well, hi. Thank you, Logan and Michelle. I'm so happy to be here. It's an honor to be on your show. Thanks.
Oh,
Thank
awesome. When we knew you were coming on, and it's before we get into too much, because the whole background and everything that we're going to discuss is pretty intense. I mean, we'll call it for what it is. And Nicole's definitely kind of brought me up to speed on a few different things too. So, but before we do that, let's do this. How about you kind of give us like a 30,000 foot view of yourself, so our audience kind of gets to know you a little bit?
Okay, great. Sure. Well, my name is Karin Wilkinson. I am the author of the book Stolen Seed, Evil Harvest. This book is published exclusively through L.A. Marzulli and his publishing company, which is where you can find it. And I am a person who has been abducted, taken against my will almost my whole life by what people call aliens, non-human alien entities. And that's what the book is about. And the book came about because a couple of years ago, I went through some PTSD therapy after having a near-death experience, which is a whole another incredible story. Mm-hmm. And that allowed me to deal with this lifetime of experiences. And once I had done that, I really felt led to L.A. Marzulli. It was very strange how it all happened. It just fell together. I did an interview with him. He's the first person I ever talked to about my experiences. It became part of the fourth movie in his UFO series on the abductions. And then again in the sixth and the ninth movies in that series. And from that, he asked me if I would write my experiences down. And I've always been a writer. I was writing for his newsletter. So it was really amazing, an amazing opportunity to write this book and to really share more detail of what has happened to me throughout my lifetime and how I was able to stop it.
Perfect. No, that's great. Yeah, I having spoken to other authors that have gone through, maybe not the experience that you've gone through, but other experiences in general. They often tell me that writing a book's always, of course, very cathartic. It kind of helps you kind of work through things and kind of, get past the I guess the mental roadblocks that you may have. It kind of helps express that. So that's awesome.
It was very cathartic and emotional at the same time.
Sure.
If anyone asks my husband, he'll say, yes, it was a lot of both. But it was so amazing because it was very easy to write, because when you're just writing your truth and things like that, it just, and already being someone who likes to write, it just kind of poured out of me. And I still have so much more to write, and there will be more coming. God willing. So I'm really enjoying the opportunity to share. And the best part has been sharing with other people. Just meeting other people who've been through similar experiences.
Sure.
Who were like, I never knew someone else experienced this before the same way that I did, or went through these same things. And I never thought there would be anyone who would understand what happened to me, and just to have someone to share it with. And for me, that was the best part of this, because it became an opportunity to allow people to talk about something that society pretty much says, no, you can't talk about this. There's got a stigma behind it. And to try to remove some of that stigma and make conversations about aliens, alien abduction, and the things that happen to people, conversations that are okay to have. Right. And because I'm finding a lot, I'm just every day probably at least on average one person a day comes into my orbit with via email at least, or tons of them through social media and things like that, who have had similar experiences. And it's been really amazing just to be able to share with people, talk to people, let people know they're not alone. That's been the coolest part of it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I bet. Yeah, I think that building community around stuff like that is it's one of those things where I think is missed with a lot of different things. When you've been through a traumatic experience, or when you've been through even an emotion, any experience really. I mean, we just bought a brand new Jeep. I'm in all these forums because I can talk to a bunch of different people and get information from it. So, I mean, community is where I think humanity really kind of strives, and where we kind of get to the middle of things. So, but yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's great. Okay, let's kind of start from the beginning. Let's go from, and I won't get too much into it because I know you probably will, but I know this has been a very lifelong, I guess, experience for you. Can you kind of start from, I guess, square one and kind of go from there?
Yeah, sure. And I think that's a great place to start, because for most people who've been through this, it's a similar pattern, it's a similar experience. My abduction started from my earliest memories. Even before I remember the whole kind of beginning to end of what was happening with these entities, I was afraid of members of my family who were tall and blonde and had really big blue eyes and were really thin, because they reminded me of these entities that I had already been exposed to at 2 or 3 years old. And there were they're called Nordic, is what people refer to them as in the UFO community. And the Nordic alien entities are similar to human, but their eyes are bigger. They don't look exactly the same. I found their hair to almost be translucent. They weren't nice to me. I was scared of them as a little child. So no one could understand when I was 2 or 3 years old why I didn't want to go to certain members of the family. But, I was already traumatized by being exposed to these entities. And around 5 or 6 is when the really more clear memories of the actual abduction experiences start to be formed for me. And I would be, it didn't matter where I was. I could be at home, at grandparents' house, at a friend's house, at a sleepover. It really didn't matter where we were. It could happen anywhere. Typically, there would be just a strange feeling in the room, a sense of something in the room with me, an evil presence. Um, Sometimes, if we were in the countryside, for example, the crickets and cicadas would just get silent. Um, Sometimes there'd be a light in the window, or a light coming from a window like down the hall that I could see from the bedroom. And I would typically, if I tried to yell or scream or cry at that point, if there was anyone else in the room with me or in the house nearby, they would be put into such a deep sleep state that I couldn't rouse them. So I would either be yelling and they couldn't hear me because they were in the deep sleep, or I thought I was yelling, but I really wasn't. It's just one of those things. But I was wide awake, and I would see typically at least two, sometimes more, of the typical gray alien entities in my room. And they would be in different places, different times. It wasn't always the same. Sometimes they'd be in a doorway or a window or in a corner or hovering over the bed. They had just the big bulbous gray kind of heads that had black screen eyes. The eyes didn't move. They looked like a screen. They had really thin necks, really thin, spindly bodies. They looked so frail. Like even I could, as a little kid, could probably break them if I was allowed to get that close to them. And they didn't speak verbally. They spoke mind speak to me. I don't like to use the word telepathy because that implies that you're kind of reading someone's mind, which it was very intentional. When they wanted me to know something, it was a very intentional message given to me, and they would get like right in my face to relay those kinds of messages. And it was just terrifying. Some of them didn't smell very good. Some of them had kind of a sulfur, dead animal excrement kind of smell to them. Some of them didn't seem to have any smell at all. I don't know why. And they would put me into a state of what I call waking paralysis. I have had sleep paralysis many times, very different from waking paralysis because I was wide awake and I knew I was awake and very aware of everything else going on. You're aware of sights and smells and sounds in a very different way when you're wide awake.
Right.
But I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I couldn't defend myself. I couldn't do anything. As little, I would just get the covers when I'd go to bed just over my head, close my eyes as tight as I could, or try to find a place to hide. And I remember my older sibling saying to me, and I was probably 5 or 6 when she said this, it doesn't matter where you hide, they can see us through the house. And this is a conversation we're having as little tiny kids, and we don't know who they are. We don't have vocabulary for who and what they are. And she knows exactly why I'm hiding. And I don't share anyone else's stories, by the way, just because everyone's story is their own story to tell.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't like to mention names and things like that. But I thought maybe I could find a suitcase and get in it and zip it up under the bed or something. I was always looking for really what I thought would be better ways to hide. But it didn't matter what I did. They always found me.
Sure.
And it was terrifying. I mean, I was terrified every night. It was just my bedroom, my home, my bed. There was no safe place. The places as little children we think should be safe were not safe for me.
Yeah. Gosh, and you think about all the conversations two sisters should be having, amongst themselves.
The last one.
That's the last one you would think that they would. Right. Wow.
That's extremely traumatic for a young child to go through.
Yeah, and then there's not only are you both having an experience, but you're also validating each other's experience.
Exactly.
So it's like not only are we both being taken or abducted or whatever, however it's framed, now we have to, I guess, have a bond over this traumatic experience. It's just, sorry, it's amazing to me because, I think about all the young, just children in general, all the lives that they have to have something like that. I mean, that must have been absolutely monumental for you guys to deal with.
It was. It was. I had multiple siblings, and like I said, I don't share anyone else's stories, but it was extremely traumatic.
Yeah.
And for us not to have a vocabulary, for, to try to talk to adults and tell someone what was happening, we didn't have the words. There weren't movies or books, and
Yeah.
even if there were things out at that point in time, they certainly weren't at our disposal, or
Right.
and they weren't mainstream. I mean, we had 3 channels on the TV back then,
I remember.
black and white mostly, so it just didn't
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
lot of outlets for these things. We didn't have Barnes and Noble or anything like that, or the internet or anything. So
Right.
when they would take me, from that point, once I was put into a state of like a waking paralysis, I would be levitated off of the bed and up to a window or up to a ceiling and through that window or through that ceiling. And I
Hmm.
would see every detail. I mean, I remember the different ceilings in the different houses and things like whether it was paint or wallpaper or spackle or that weird popcorn ceiling stuff or the
Yeah.
lights and the bugs that were in the lights or different lights had different designs on them and things, just weird things that stick in my memory because I would be so close to these things. And it would feel like this low vibrational hum was just engulfing me and the room and everything. It just was overwhelming. And I felt the sense of like a vibration, like a full body, just everything vibrating, like I was splitting into like a bazillion little ball bearings pieces, something like that. It's so hard to explain because we really don't have anything that
Yeah.
feels like that or does that because we don't understand physics the way they understand physics.
Mm-hmm.
So I hear some people say they're defying the laws of physics. Well, not necessarily. They just understand it a lot better than we do. They're so
Right.
much more advanced than we are. So at that point, I would be taken, and that's the point usually where I would go into a deep sleep state. Probably because of the stress on my physical and mental body, emotional stress
Right.
at that point. But I would wake up. Sometimes I would just wake up on an exam table with more strange beings around me. Sometimes I would wake up at these elevator doors, and I'd still be with the little grays at that point. And they would lead me into these elevators that just went down and down. I don't remember normal buttons or anything. They were just
Mm-hmm.
weird symbols on the walls and stuff. And it would just go down and down and down. And then we would get on what I called the sideways elevators because as a little kid, vehicles were loud in the 60s and 70s. Buses,
Yeah.
cars, trains, everything made noise.
Yep.
And these were silent. And they had bench seats in them. And I just remember like digging my fingers into the stitching on the seats.
Wow.
But
Mm.
it would just go up at an angle or down at an angle or crazy turns and, but side to side, not just straight up and down like the elevator would.
Right.
And that would take me to different places. It was different every time. I couldn't explain it every time because every time is different.
Right.
But we were definitely in some sort of an underground facility because we're going down, we're in some sort of elevator. There are no windows. There are lots of people, lots of different kinds of entities. These facilities were just massive, like as big as if you take football stadiums and airports and high schools and all those things and you just put them together and over again. They're huge, some massive rooms that just seem to go on forever and just tons of hallways and stairs and doors and little rooms and just more stuff than you can imagine. Like you'd get totally lost if you didn't have someone, taking you where they wanted you to go. And the entire time, and this is really common, and now the more people I talk to, it's funny because we all have experienced the same sensation. We get what my friend L.A. Marzulli coins as UFO brain fog, where you can't think quite straight. It's like thinking and walking through molasses.
Yep.
Everything is just a struggle. And so you can't go yelling for help or running to try to talk to somebody or grab it because it's like you're scrambled a little bit and you're just slowed down. And it's like it's like restraints almost.
Right.
It's just so hard to describe because I've had a lot of people say, well, why didn't you talk to the other people? Well, we're told not to. And I was warned not to talk to the other people there. and I was also warned not to talk to my family, and I was threatened not to talk to my family, and I'll jump ahead to that, and then I can go back to the entities and that kind of thing if you want. But
Yeah,
I
actually,
was
if you don't
around.
mind, because I'm glad you brought that up because I'm sitting here thinking the whole time, well, why aren't you, why not
Yeah,
tell your
the
parents?
parents.
I was
Yeah.
Right?
trying to,
Hmm.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
tried. I talked to anyone who would listen. I tried to tell everyone. I tried to tell everyone at school, parents, friends, teachers, school
Hmm.
nurses. But remember, I didn't have a good vocabulary, so the little ones, the gray
Sure.
ones, they have big heads. They have big eyes. I don't like them. They're scary. The little ones, they're taking me. Well, honey, where are they taking you? They're taking me in the elevator.
Hmm.
Well,
Right.
what are they doing? Well,
Yeah.
they're doing, I don't know, X-ray, or they have needles, and so now they think, okay, she's talking about a doctor's appointment or a
Hmm.
bad dream. To the parents and the teachers and everyone's defense, a lot of kids talk about a lot of things and that
Sure.
don't
They
make
do.
sense. A
Yeah.
lot of things get chalked up to bad dreams or make believe or imaginary friends or what have you, or other kids at school talking about things, or there's just so many different
Right.
directions that it can go. Especially, I mean, I didn't know what to say they were, and they
Exactly.
aren't giving forthcoming with information exactly. They're
Right.
just taking
Yeah.
what they want. So I'm trying to talk about it, and then one night they came to take me, and instead of the typical kind of taking me off and doing whatever they were going to do that night, and it was usually at night, and I think that's because that's just an easy time.
Hmm.
People are asleep, people aren't watching, especially back then. You didn't have security cameras, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have,
Right.
everything wasn't watched and reported and stuff, so um, they took me, and instead of typical, they took me out, and I'm in the backyard, which that would happen from time to time, that I was outside of, I think it was my grandparents' house at that point in time, and I was very much outside. I remember the feeling of the grass under my feet because I was in my pajamas, and they told me that I had to be a good girl, that I had to stop talking about them. I couldn't tell anyone, or I would, or they would hurt. I would cause my family to be hurt. Basically, those weren't the words
Wow.
they used, but I'm trying to put it
Hmm.
nicely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They showed me what we call a screen memory. So back then, it wouldn't have made sense to anyone, but today I can say it's like putting on a pair of VR goggles, where
Hmm.
everything just looks so real. Like you could just reach out and touch it. That's how it looked. I couldn't tell it real from fake. But
Hmm.
it couldn't have been real because they showed all of my family coming out, and not all my family members were necessarily at that house that night. So, and I was on one side of the clothesline in the backyard, and they were all on the other. And if you do anything, you're going, your family's going to be killed. And they sprayed this stuff on their necks, on the backs of their necks, and then I had to watch them show me what it would be like to see my family beheaded in front of me as a five,
Oh my
6-year-old kid.
God.
Jeez. Wow.
It was,
Wow.
I wrote about it. That was really, really hard to write about.
I'm
I'm
It's
sure.
one
sure
of
it
those
was.
memories, one of those things that never, never leaves you.
Hmm.
It is so deeply
Hmm.
ingrained. And so I go back to school, and I think that's the point at which I just had a total breakdown, a total
Yeah.
meltdown. I realized that there was nothing I could do. I wasn't going to risk my family being hurt,
Hmm.
and no one was understanding me anyway. And I didn't feel like there was anyone who was going to be able to help me. And I really had to just give in. And they found me at school that day, huddled in the corner of a bathroom stall, just holding onto my knees, rocking back and forth. And I wouldn't come out, and I wouldn't talk to anyone. So they called my mom, and she came and got me out of the bathroom. I remember, she coaxed me out, and I felt, some safety with her there. Um, and I remember just saying, I don't want them to take me. I don't want them to touch me anymore. So she's like, okay, someone's hurting my daughter. I'm taking
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
to the doctor. So she took me to the family doctor, and he looked me over and said, well, I had some weird burns and scratches and marks on me, but nothing that they could pinpoint anything specifically to. And he said, whatever's happened, she's young, she'll forget, she'll be fine.
Mm.
Hmm.
This is in the 70s,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before they knew.
60s, 70s.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a different time. I know I get a lot
Hmm.
of
Yeah.
flack for that answer, but I'm like, that's what he said. And
Yeah.
back then, she did the responsible thing.
Right.
It was all she knew to do.
Well, and you're right. They
So
wouldn't.
at that
I guess in that particular time too, I'll be 50 this year, so I mean, I remember a time when this was still very, very, I guess wasn't as mainstream as it is now, and you
Well,
Oh
wouldn't.
yeah,
How
I
would a
don't doubt
parent?
about this.
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, what do they? What do you even? There's no precedence really to kind of go down to kind of say no. This
Well, and
is
mental
No,
health is not,
yeah,
wasn't focused on back
no.
then at
no,
all.
I didn't know anyone who ever went to a psychologist or a
No.
mm-mm,
psychiatrist or anything like that. No, not until I was probably in my 20s or something like that. Who ever, knew that people did that. So it was
Yeah.
just a different time, and the world was a very different
Mm-hmm.
place then too. And so we just didn't have the information sharing that we have today. So I think at that
Right.
point in time is when I really kind of had a dissociative split where there was a part of me that was present when those things were happening, when the abductions were happening, and then there was a part of me that just lived a day to day, everyday kind of little kid life.
Mm-hmm.
And I really had to split the two because I couldn't function
Mm-hmm.
while knowing that this was going to happen again, or that I could cause my family to be hurt because I said something.
Yeah.
So, from that point on, I really had a separation. And I think the mind, the human mind, and God gives us that ability to just really, it's a kind of a built in protection mechanism that we have.
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a little kid, and little kids do this a lot, with difficult things, and it's how they get through it. Um, and that's what worked for me for a very long time. So, and I think it helped too because when they would come to take me, I was very docile after that. I didn't fight. I didn't struggle. I'm just like, fine, let it go. I'll go,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to take me hopefully back and it'll be, over. And so I think because I was being so docile and so agreeable is probably why I have a lot of the memories that I have. I've never done regression therapy or anything like that to remember. These are just the memories I have. And I don't remember everything. I just remember a lot of things.
Right.
And I don't share the things that I don't remember well enough to be, to give enough detail.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think that's why, because I've talked to other people who did the same thing as little kids. They remember when they just kind of split and just kind of
Yeah.
learned how to do that, and we remember more. And I think it's because when your brain's not engaging with them, then they don't have to really shut you down,
Mm,
And
Right.
I'm like,
yeah,
Yeah.
wow, that's probably why I remember. I don't know. That's just
Mm-hmm.
me spitballing what it could be, but so that's
yeah,
conjecture on my part. But it's possibly the truth. I think that's what it seems to be the pattern with people.
yeah. And
And then
I've
whenever
noticed
we're
that with
done,
trauma too. I know a lot of people they do that very thing that you're talking about, where you almost, like you said, disassociate so that you can even make it through your day to day
Mm-hmm.
life, knowing that there's this whole other side of your existence that A, you
Yeah.
don't want to even think about, and B, you can't talk to anyone about. So it just kind of lays in a very dormant state until it's activated. So
That's
yeah,
how
yeah,
a lot
it's
of
a safe
mental
place.
disorders are born.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
wow,
Exactly,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
exactly. And that's why once I did the PTSD therapy, I had a lot of tools that I didn't have
Yeah.
before to help me to be able to safely talk about the memories.
Right.
Before, if I started to talk about them, I would just, I'd
yeah,
kind of drift away,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was it. And I didn't talk about it, quite honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because it was just, I was still had that constant fear that I can't talk about it, even though I knew, after I knew who and what they were and how to stop it, that fear was just so ingrained in me that I
hmm,
Mm-hmm.
had realized I hadn't actually let that part go. And so that was
yep,
a
Yeah.
really big deal to let that go and let God take that. Because,
Mm-hmm.
fear is not something that God gives you. That's definitely not from God and from the
Right.
good. That's definitely
Right.
not. So, and, when they were done, when I would get returned home, sometimes I would get returned to my bed. Sometimes I would end up in another room in the house. Sometimes my pajamas would be in another room or inside out or at the foot of the bed. I mean,
hmm,
just weird things like that, just
Mm-hmm.
random. And I'd usually go sleep like under my parents' bed after they returned me because it seemed
Mm.
like the safest place to go at that time.
Yeah.
right,
Um, so yeah, just it's so funny because I talk to other people who've been through this, and like when to this day, even when I go to a hotel room or something, and I go to put my things down on the bed, my husband, it was funny. He said something a while back. He's like, "You don't have a side of the bed, do you?" And I said, "No, I just instinctively always pick the side furthest away from the window."
Mm.
That's
So it
interesting.
doesn't matter
Yeah.
what side it is. I just don't ever sleep by the window.
Yeah.
And I was talking to another friend the other day who he slept with his self wedged up against the wall for like the
Mm.
first 12, 13 years of his life,
Mm.
Yeah.
because he thought that would, help him. So
Yeah.
many of us have these little things that we do that, like a lot of us, myself and many other people I've spoken with, I couldn't look out a window at night for the longest time, you know,
Sure.
or walk through the house at night without having, especially once we had the phones, I'd never get up without the phone
Mm-hmm.
in my hand, ready to go. Because I'm like,
Yeah.
it just little things that never quite left that I didn't realize were still hanging on, these
Mhm.
fears
Yeah.
and things. So,
Well, your body records trauma so much differently than other things.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, unless you've experienced traumatic things, you don't realize that it doesn't necessarily store away like other memories that you've had. Your body remembers it in a completely different way. So when you go through PTSD therapy and you go through things like EMDR and things like that, you realize that there are two completely different structures that
Mm-hmm.
oh
basically
yeah,
reside within your conscious.
exactly. And you realize that for some of us, for me especially, I was always in this fight mode, like always in this,
Yeah.
especially at night. I didn't know how to just calm down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was always on alert. And that's like constantly being in hyper fight, ready to go alert mode. And that's not good for you or for your
No, it
body
No,
is
or your
not.
blood
absolutely
pressure or
not.
anything else.
I can tell
So
you as a
it's,
veteran, it is not a good place to
no.
be.
And that's sad
Mhm.
because your bedroom's supposed to be the place where you are
Yeah.
the most relaxed and restful and feel safe.
Right?
Like it's for like pets, it's like their den, and
Hmm.
that's scary. That's so
It is,
sad.
yeah, not to have that
Yeah.
safe place.
Mm-hmm.
My closet was always the place where I felt like I could go and be safe. I put a blanket and a
Yeah.
pillow in there or things like that, and just make
Yeah.
a nest in there as when I was little and younger because I could find a safe place. And for me, that was a
Mm.
safer place than my
Right.
own room.
Which is the
Um,
opposite for most kids, because
Yeah.
usually they're scared of the closet
Right.
because that's where they see their
right.
monsters or
Yeah.
ghosts or whatever. So that's interesting. That's
Exactly,
like the exact
exactly.
opposite.
Jeez.
Exactly.
Hmm.
That's yeah. So, so that's kind of how it went. When I was taken, I can talk about like the different kinds of entities that I saw, if you
Yeah,
want.
if
I
you
know
don't
that's
mind,
kind
I
I'm
of
know we talked about
curious,
the
yeah.
Nordics a little bit, and
The
hmm
Greys,
the
which always
Greys,
seem to be
and
the
I know,
ones that bring you.
yeah, they always seem to
yeah.
be either like I often think they're like drones, but they're not. They're kind of half drone, but they're not really. We talked to I don't know if you're familiar with
Exactly.
who Les Velez is or not, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
when we talked to him, he said that there was an experiencer that actually ripped the arm off of one of them, and it didn't
It
even
didn't
flinch.
flinch or nothing.
I
So,
can.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
that's just
What
wild. But
I
yeah,
have. Yeah, with the little grays, and I've written a lot about them. I wrote some about it in the book, and I write a lot about it for L.A. Marzulli's newsletter too. Um, the little ones that come to get me, they are, I believe, a form of an avatar, like a meat suit, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
Like
yeah,
we can create skin in a lab, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what I believe they are. They are created to hold another entity, whether it's AI, whether it's a demon, whether it's another form of another entity, whatever. They're basically a shell created to hold something else that comes to kind of do the dirty work, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
So, and if you
hmm,
think about it, if they're caught, if there is a crash, and we know from the congressional hearings that we have crashed craft and then we have
Mm-hmm.
biologics, if that's all you're getting, and say that thing is inhabited by a demon, that can, or AI, that can leave that skin suit behind, and all they're going to be left with is an empty skin suit.
yeah,
And remember, those eyes, they look like a screen. They didn't move. They were just like a station, like a fixed
Yeah.
piece on a mask almost. And some of them didn't smell very good, where I think maybe it was older or something. But
hmm,
they did
Okay.
all they all look the same. They look like little cookie cutters.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the other entities, the other grays, the other entities I saw, none of them looked all the same. They all looked different. There are other grays that were there when I was taken, and they aren't like those little grays. They are, and back to the little grays real quick for a minute. Think about it. Their mouths don't open. Their eyes are fixed. They don't seem to have ears. They are very frail. And like I said, they look like you could just break them in half. And that creates just a very simple structure to carry out very simple tasks. So they can't go outside of that task. They can't yell at you. They can't bite you. They can't fight you because they're very simple structure. They're not designed to do very much. But the grays that were there after they took me to wherever I went, whether it was an exam room or different kinds. There were sometimes I was in a room with other kids and we were just sitting there with these big tables, like big round tables with the little kid type chairs like you'd see in like a preschool or something.
Yeah.
Just little, and weird things on the tables, like weird shaped blocks, and then regular things too, like coloring books, crayons, things like that. And, excuse me. And the other grays that were there, some were tall, some were shorter, some looked heavier, some looked thinner. They had faces that had facial expressions. Their eyes moved. They had actual eyes, not just screens.
Right.
They had foreheads that would, wrinkle and faces that moved. The other ones didn't. Some looked more feminine, some looked more masculine, and there were reptilian type entities as well, and they all looked different. They were much larger. There were some grays that kind of looked like reptilian and some reptilian that kind of looked gray, like there was some crossover in there. So I really kind of just put them in a couple of categories, but I think there was crossover. Who knows how many categories of them and how many different kinds there are. I certainly don't. But the reptilian types were very big, very muscular. They weren't like ugly, big lizard. They weren't, some of them were quite beautiful in a weird way. I know it sounds weird, but they weren't, it's so hard to describe. They weren't big, ugly creatures necessarily. Some of them were.
Right.
I had one that was around me throughout my whole life, and I write about him in the book. I call him my handler. And I thought he was very beautiful. I had a very Stockholm syndrome type relationship with him.
Okay.
So yeah, and that is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Another day, but that's definitely something we can come back to because that is a huge part of what happened and what went on. But there were lots of different kinds of those. There were the Nordic type, which I talked about before, which have kind of a human look about them, but their eyes are so big. And they definitely seem to have this detest. They seem to just really not want anything to do with me or any other humans I saw around. There were the insect type they're all kind of different, but they were always kind of off in a corner. When I was little, I remember calling them the corner sitters because they would always be kind of sitting off in a corner watching everybody. And I can't stand to this day to look at things like hammerhead sharks or certain kinds of sea animals especially. This is weird because they remind me so much of sea creatures, even though they're like an insect, because the shapes of their heads and how their eyes are on kind of the ends and they move independently. And they were just the weirdest, freakiest, scariest to me of all of the things that I saw down there. And they seem to be more like hierarchy. They seem to be up there in the hierarchy because I didn't really see anyone interact with them very much.
Right.
They seem to just be more directing. There were humans working alongside these things. And they weren't to speak to us or interfere with us and vice versa. And they warned them, and they used me and other abductees to show what would happen where we would be abused in front of them or raped in front of them or what have you. And they would say, you don't want this to happen to your wives, your daughters, your friends, your children, etc. And And I understand, it's hard to know that they couldn't help me or the others who were being taken. There were a lot of other humans there that were being taken, and there were humans that were working. Some of them were wearing like what looked like lab coats or doctor kind of coats. Some were just wearing these like really plain smock type outfits, almost like a beige kind of color, really benign, nondescript. Some looked like they were in not scrubs. Well, yeah, I guess they're kind of like scrubs, those smocks. But some looked like they were in fatigues, like some kind of military fatigue, but not like the green jungle fatigue. It was more of a browns and earth tone kind of colors. And yeah, it took me a long time to figure that out and to come to terms with that and to make peace with that, with the people that were there. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, these people were probably working a job where they were told, hey, you're going to get this top secret clearance and get to work on these cool projects, and they say, okay, and they sign their NDA and they get in there, because having worked on cool projects, I realize how quickly those things go. Obviously not the same thing, but for me, but, and then before they know it, they're in a project where they've signed off on doing it. And then imagine yourself there. And then imagine yourself, I can't bring this onto my family.
Yeah.
I can't say anything. I can't do anything, right? And I often wonder, too, because of the weird outfits some of them were wearing, if some of them didn't live there.
Sure.
Like if there were quarters or something, I never saw living quarters where they might have lived, or I don't remember seeing them. It doesn't mean I didn't see them. I just don't have a memory of it.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on, at any
How did you
Sounds
sleep
like
at night? I mean,
Yeah, I don't know how you
I
even got
didn't,
through.
honestly, barely.
jeez.
I mean, you sleep because you trick your mind into not letting it go there. But
Yeah.
I will tell you, as an adult, especially when we all got cable and all these channels started showing up, and then in my 30s and 40s, UFO shows start showing up.
Yeah.
And if I couldn't ever watch one, but if I'm flipping through channels and I see it on the information bar, that'd be enough to keep me up all night. I didn't have to
I'm
watch
sure.
it.
I don't
I
doubt
didn't have
it.
to see it. I just had
Yeah.
to see the word alien or UFO somewhere. When I first saw Whitley Strieber's book, Communion, in the bookstore, I had a panic attack.
Yeah.
I had to leave the store, sitting outside with my head between my legs, trying not to throw up. Everyone's going, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "I must have had food poisoning." I mean, what do you say?
Yeah.
I
Yeah. And
saw a
for
gray alien on a book cover, and I'm having a freak out? No, because I don't want them to kill my family.
and for the folks that don't know, Whitley Strieber's book is called Communion, and on the very cover of it is a gray, and it is very big. It's literally the only thing on the cover.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
you can
know a
see it
lot
from
of people.
across the room.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
There's no missing it.
I couldn't imagine you not being triggered from something like that.
No. No, and now today, after I shared that story, oh gosh, it had to have been sometime last year. I haven't talked about that in a long time, but then so many people came up to me going, I had that same reaction. I had that same reaction. I'm like, okay, it was not just me, and I'm sure he didn't do that on purpose, to upset anyone, but then I realized how triggering some of these things can be to people. And that's why I say about my book, that, it's not all the scary stuff. It's not all the dark stuff. There's a lot of light and a lot of good and a lot of positive in the book, because I don't want, for people who've experienced these things, I don't want it to scare them away. I want it to be something that helps set them free. And that's really important to me, because I was set free, and I want other people who have experienced this and don't want to be in it anymore to know that they don't have to be scared and don't have to go through that anymore. So but yeah, for those of us who've gone through it, it's just hard to say what's going to trigger you, and
Sure.
back to your point. Yeah. So there were nights where I didn't sleep. And, if my husband was out of town and I happened to see something like that, not only did I not sleep, but then I had to turn something really benign on TV, like the 24-hour weather channel, and just let that play all night, because I couldn't not have, and get the dog and the cats in bed with me, or whatever,
Yeah.
Right.
I had around. I just, that terror was so real. And it's only been the last 10 years of my life where I've been able to let that go. And I can't imagine how many people still live that way, but I know a lot of people do because I speak to them every day.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
Karen, I know that there are folks that have been in your position where it's been a very traumatic experience, of course. But then there's also the folks that have been through it that have not had that kind of experience. Do you ever,
Exactly.
I guess the way I kind of want to frame the question up, do you ever, I guess, push back and say, I don't know who you push back to, and like there's upper management for them or anything, but
Right.
do you ever just go, how in the heck are these people having this really good experience?
And I got the bad
I'm getting the
experience.
shaft here.
I can speak to that a little bit. Yeah, I think everybody
Okay.
has different opinions and different views on this, and I don't disparage anyone else's experiences or how they want to frame their story, because honestly, to come forward and talk about this takes a lot of bravery. You
Absolutely.
don't talk about this and expect people to accept it with open arms. It is still a very taboo topic. It is still not something that's accepted. It's still not
Right.
something that people look at you and say, you're crazy. That still happens a lot. And people think of someone who says, I'm an UFO, I've been abducted by UFOs, they think you belong in a loony bin. No, it's
Yeah.
normal people like me and you
Yeah.
and your neighbor and your friend and the mailman. And it doesn't matter. It's everybody. It's anybody.
Mhm.
It's probably 50% of everybody, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And according to a Roper poll, at least 50% of the people believe. So, but for a lot of reasons, people come out with different thoughts on it. For one, there are I really believe that the beings that were taking me, that were kidnapping me against my will my whole life, that were raping me and other people and doing these things, were fallen angelic beings. If you look at ancient texts, ancient history, ancient scrolls, and I'm not just going down like a preachy or a religious path, I'm going down a ancient texts, ancient scrolls, even biblical, whatever path. This stuff is documented throughout history, through all of history and everything that we have. It's on cave walls, it's on rocks, it's on scrolls, it's everywhere. There are fallen and there are the not fallen. There are the good and the evil, the light and the dark. That is true of everything in this world, right?
Right.
And I have had experience with a very, very positive angelic experience, and I write about that in the book too, so that people can see the contrast between the two. When I was being taken throughout my lifetime, and I became very compliant, then it became one of these kind of Stockholm Syndrome relationships where the better I was, the more well-behaved I was, the better my experience was. And I was allowed to do other things, explore more. I was taught to pilot a ship. I was allowed to do different things. And it's kind of like in that abusive relationship where you can only take so much, but then they bring you a piece of jewelry or a new dress or something else to kind of keep you on the hook, right?
Right.
And you're so used to it, you don't know anything else. And that's why when you don't know any better, you don't do any better. And so for me, I understand why some people see it as a very positive thing. But for the people that I've talked to and encountered in those situations, I've asked, were you taken against your will? Well, yes, initially. Were you sexually abused? Well, yes, but, were you implanted against your will? Well, yes. All of these answers keep coming back, yes. I can understand why, especially with this level of Stockholm Syndrome kind of capture bonding. Stockholm Syndrome is when, I should explain that, is sometimes referred to as capture bonding. So when someone is kidnapped or taken against their will, and especially held for long periods of time, or maybe a child is trafficked or an adult is trafficked or whatever, the person who is in charge of them, that captor is responsible for their health, their well-being, brings them food, brings them water, keeps them some sort of safety in the relative unknown that they're in. And so the person who's been taken forms a bond with that captor, because that captor is now the person who is actually keeping them alive or keeping them going or keeping them safe to some weird degree. And it's a very common thing for someone who's been taken to create a bond with their captor. And that's what happened to me, and that's what's happened to many, many other abductees. So that creates this relationship where you start to make excuses for it, and you start to see finding good in it, and and making the best of a bad situation. So when people say, well, why don't you think these are benevolent space brothers? And I do not think that these are benevolent space brothers. I say because I can't get behind kidnapping little children, terrorizing little children,
Yeah.
raping men and women, taking sperm from men, ovum from women, using it for a breeding program, which I was a part of, which again would have to be a conversation for another day, but I do write about it in the book as well. And then look at cattle animal mutilations, the cattle mutilations. And yes, they were doing
Yeah.
that. But taking that blood to utilize in these breeding programs and other things. Bovine blood, cattle blood, can be used in place of human blood. It can be done in our hospitals today. If you look it
Yep.
up, that blood is very compatible to ours, same as we use the bovine milk for our children and ourselves. And I love ice cream, so I get that.
Who
But
doesn't? I mean,
so I'm trying to put some light in here because I
Yeah.
think
no,
you know,
please, yeah, that's
No.
fine. Yeah.
but I can't get behind the fact that kidnapping, rape, and torturing animals and children and all that is benevolent behavior. Implanting people with objects. My friend Emil Jewick, he was patient 17. You might have heard of that movie. He had the implant removed from his knee. L.A. Marzulli did that. It's in L.A. Marzulli's movie series, and you can watch that. You can stream that on his website as well. But he's a good friend of mine, and he didn't want that implant put in his knee, and it caused him a great deal of problem and trauma
Sure.
and issues. And then and I had one in my elbow that I pulled out myself. I didn't want that thing in there. So all of those things, I just, if you kidnap your neighbor's kid, you're going to jail.
Oh, yeah.
There's nowhere on this earth that's going to be considered good behavior, let
No, I
alone going down
agree.
the street and killing the neighbor's cow and draining all the blood out of it. It just
Right.
doesn't fly with me that that's good behavior. So I understand why there are a lot of different angles of it, and but it's a very these entities, they are stronger than us, they are smarter than us, they've been around a lot longer than us, and I know that they have the same creator as us, because when I looked at them and I said, you have the same creator as me, you can't take me anymore, and called on God to make them go away and save me from them, that's what happened. And they confirmed it, that we have the same creator. And I'm not telling anyone to believe a specific religion or a specific
Yeah.
way. No. My book is written from a biblical perspective, not a religious perspective, because I use facts from different ancient texts and things like that to help the reader understand where these things come from. But when I said that to them, they had to back down. I mean, I've had them in my face and said, no, you can't touch me. And they don't, and they can't. And I've been able to break those bonds and those curses. And then I had help too from my friend Vicki Joy Anderson, who wrote the book They Only Come Out at Night. And wherever you find my book, you can find hers. But she talks a lot about the dark side of sleep paralysis, and her expertise really is in those bonds, those connections, those agreements that we make that we don't realize we've made, and how to break those agreements. And so, agreements are made on my behalf, whether by me or by someone else on my behalf, for them to take me. And I had to break those bonds and break those agreements to get out of it. And I did. And it was amazing, because just to watch them back down and not have any power over me after
Yeah.
a lifetime of that was incredible.
I'm
Yeah.
And it
sure.
just took me listening, and finally accepting that fact and knowing that. So to know that, that they have to, it's a very legalistic society. But I guess my point on that was, and I'll try not to stray too far off topic, sorry, is
You're
that
fine. Yeah.
they are a lot bigger and stronger and smarter than we are.
Yeah.
Even though we are protected and we have protection from them, I caution people, don't go calling on them, don't go looking for them, don't go trying to get them to come and visit you, because it's just like anything else in this world. There are good ones and there are evil ones, and the
Right.
problem is just like with anything else, a carjacker doesn't walk around with a t-shirt that says, hey, I'm a carjacker. A thief doesn't walk around with a t-shirt that says, hey, I'm a pickpocketer, I'm a thief, or I'm about to go rob that bank. It's not how it works.
Yeah.
When little kids are lured into a van, it's with a puppy or candy, not with,
Right.
scary masks and things like that. So it's
Yeah.
always that sense of luring you in, making you think that they're good when they're not. And you just don't know what you're going to get. And there are no guarantees. But once you invite that into your life, it is going to be with you forever, and it is going to be life-changing. And it's just not something you want to bring to yourself or your family. So that's where my cautionary tale about these things goes, as far as benevolent or malevolent.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Sorry, my screen froze up there for a minute, so I wasn't sure
You're good.
if I lost
No,
you or not.
no, you didn't
I
lose
know
me.
that was a lot to lay on you. Sorry.
No, that's great. I mean, it's not great, but it's I appreciate
No.
you kind of. There's so much there to unpack, and there's absolutely no way we can get it all done in one show. Would absolutely love to talk to you again, especially with we definitely want to talk about the breeding aspect. That's something that's always been intriguing to me, and I could not imagine that being something that's a short story. And I don't want to lessen that story.
No.
But
Thank you.
I definitely want to have you back if that's something that you're up to, and I think our audience would really like to hear about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to come back. I love you guys. You have been just lovely and so much fun to be
thank
with.
you.
And
I
I'd love
appreciate
to
it.
talk to you before the show, and I look forward to our talk after the show. So
Yeah.
I would love to come back
Absolutely.
anytime. Yes, thank you.
Well, that's great. Well, listen, obviously the subject matter and everything involved is so intense and captivating. I'm sure our audience may want to reach out to you, or at least get a hold of your books. Now, I know it's Stolen Seed and Evil Harvest, correct? Those are the two books. Okay.
It's one book.
How can they?
It's Stolen Seed,
Oh, okay.
Evil Harvest. It's just one book. Yeah. Right now,
Okay.
this is the first book. There will be more coming, but right now it's one book.
Okay.
Gotcha. Well, how do they
And
get a hold of you? What do they do?
Yes, sorry.
No, you're fine.
You're right. My website is my name, KarinWilkinsonAuthor.com. So you can reach out to me through my website, and there is a contact page. Just go to that contact page and send me a message, and I will get back to you. Sometimes it takes a while depending on how many messages I'm getting through and whether I'm traveling or not at the time, but I will get back to you. That's the best way to get in touch with me. You can find me on social media under my name, Karin Wilkinson, or Karin Wilkinson Author, and there'll be a blue check mark so you know you found me when you find that, and you'll see this interview on my social media, so you'll know you found me through that as well. And you can leave me a message there, but I can't guarantee how quickly I'll get to you through those messages, because I get slammed with tons of messages through social media that are just junk messages or spam, and I do wade through them because I don't want to miss anyone's message, but it's hard to wade through those messages, so I do that about once every couple of weeks. So if you send me a message there, it might take me a while. And sometimes, sometimes email is not a perfect thing. Sometimes they go in spam, or sometimes they get lost. So if you try to get a hold of me and you haven't heard from me, just send me another message and let me know, because I don't want to miss anyone's messages. The book is available exclusively at lamarzulli.com. That's LAMARZ as in zebra, ULLI.com, lamarzulli.com, or wherever I am. If you go to his events page, I'm at his events that he's at usually, and so I usually have the books with me wherever I am at events. Or if you want a signed copy, you can just reach out to me through my website, and I'm happy to send copies out that way as well. I can send copies out directly that way. But yeah, I love to hear from people, just to share our stories, or get people in touch with someone who might be able to help. Obviously, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, but like you said before, we were talking before the show, there's comfort in community. And I know you've had different people on talking about, like Les and all those people, talking about the different communities that are out there. Find a community that fits you. Find a community that works for you, for your belief system, for where you are. And if you can't, just reach out and, or go to some of the events, find somebody to talk to. You can find me through social media, and you guys are out there. There's a lot of great people out there trying to share this kind of information, because it's still not something that's really very well received in the general
Right.
public. So it's hard to find places and resources. It's not very abundant yet, but I have a feeling it's going to become more abundant as time goes on, as people like you, Logan and Michelle, as you start sharing more of this type of information. I think more and more people will get involved and start doing more to help. And I think so. It's great what you're doing. Thank you, and keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great way to end this. And thank you so much for being on the show. We can look forward to talking to you
Thank you for
soon.
having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I look forward to coming back. You guys are great. I can't wait till next time. Thank you, and
Awesome.
very
Thank you.
much.
You know, for as much as she's been through, to be able to be, she's got tremendous strength.
Yes, she does. Very brave woman.
Yeah.
Very strong woman.
You know, guys, you heard this. It's like I said, it's not often I'm caught for a loss for words, but yeah, she's obviously, we're going to have her back. I think that with Karin, we probably need to have at least a couple more shows.
Yeah, there's so much that she has to talk about.
Yeah, and guys, if you get ahead of us and get the book and read ahead, we're okay with that. You're not going to get in trouble like you would in school or something like that. And as you heard, we'll probably read it ourselves so that we can.
Yeah, before next time.
Before next time, but what can you say?
I just, working with young children, and just, we've all been young children, thinking about what she went through as a child. Just, there's a couple times there listening to her speak, I got a little moisture in my eyes, because I cannot imagine being that terrified as a child.
No.
Like, I have experiences as a child, more ghost-like experiences.
We've covered that a little bit.
Demon-like experiences. And that was terrifying enough.
Yeah.
And that was just a small, well, not a small experience, but something that happened very quickly and was over.
Right.
Was I still scared to go to bed? Was I still scared to look in my closet? Yes.
Of course.
But having to go to bed every night, like, kids think they see monsters or whatever the deal is, and they're scared and they want to sleep in their parents' bed. I don't know how those parents got her to bed every night.
No. Well, and she didn't share it with them, so.
Well, but I know, but like, for her to not be able to talk about, it's just.
Yeah.
Wow. It really touched me, because I know how little kids think. I know how they speak. I know, how they hide things. And it just really, it just really got to me. To think that she went through that all those years. And now, at the age she is as an adult, this is what happens with childhood trauma. Look how long it's taken. And she's still not ever going to be 100% okay. Right. I mean, we need to remember this.
Right.
For our mental health. And these young experiences as a child, no matter what it is, will affect you for the rest of your life.
It will. And
something like that, I don't know how she can even go to bed now as an adult.
I don't either.
Like, honest to God,
Jeez.
I don't know how.
Well, when we have her back on, we're going to talk about the next subject, which...
And possibly what...
Yeah.
The purpose of all this was.
Right. And guys, look forward to that. We'll let you know when it's coming out. It'll probably be a while. Other than that, guys, again, thank you so much for showing up and taking this, again, somewhat difficult ride, but I'm glad you guys were here. And
if this was a triggering episode for you, if you've had experiences like Karin, please reach out to her.
Yes. Please
reach out to us if you need someone to talk to. Don't try to go through this by yourself, because there's a community for a reason. There's a reason we do this podcast.
Yep.
It's to reach other people that have had experiences and are too afraid to talk about it. So please.
We can get you in touch with them.
Yeah, we can get you in touch with, anybody that we've spoken to, at least up till now.
Yeah.
They're willing to help. Every single person we have spoke with is willing to help. That's why they do what they do. So please reach out. The community is here. Well, can't think of any better way to end it than that, guys. Thank you so much. And
We'll see you next week.
And see you next week.